Should you stay as an LLC or should you switch to an S corporation? When does it make sense to switch between these entities? These are all the questions that I constantly get in my comments and from clients at KDA. That is why in this video, I am going to break it down for you. I am going to give you the differences. I am going to give you the benefits and why might someone convert from one to the other. This is so important for you to understand. But before you jump in, I need you to like, I need you to comment, and I need you to subscribe so you don't miss any wealth building information. You can't afford to. So let's just get after it. The first thing I want to talk about is the difference between an LLC and an S-Corp in the simplest terms. There is so much confusion out there, and I'm just going to say to you guys, you got to get educated around this topic. An LLC is a limited liability company. An S corporation is a corporation that you go to IRS and ask, can you be taxed as a small business corporation? They are different, and I need you to understand that. Both of them are going to be originated through the Secretary of State of the state in which you operate in. You have to formally set up an LLC. I cannot tell you how many people come to me and say, Carla, I got an LLC because they came up with a name, 123 Main Street LLC. That is not an LLC. You actually have to go formalize it by going to the Secretary of State and actually form the LLC. The difference between the two of them is that as an LLC, you can form a single member LLC. You can file that LLC in with your individual tax return on a Schedule C, and you can have one member in a single member LLC. An S corporation is a separate entity that requires you to file a separate tax return. You have to file a separate tax return, and you have to file it every single year. You can have shareholders inside of your S corporation. You do not have shareholders that hold stock, shares of stock. You do not have that in an LLC. LLCs have members. That is the name of the individuals that own the LLC. They're called members. So it's so important for you guys to make that distinction between whether you're in an LLC or whether you are in an S corporation. When you are in an S corporation, you are in a formal entity. That is like going to the university versus going to junior college. You are at the highest level of a corporation. You just asked to be a small business corp. You got to issue stock. You got to keep your corporate minutes. You got to file that tax return. You got to make sure you do all of those formal things when you are an S corporation, which you do not have to do when you are a limited liability company. So I hopefully have really made you guys understand the difference. And also another key major difference, and we're really going to dive into this even a little bit more, is that an S corp, by all intents and purposes, is considered to be a passive activity entity. What does that mean? It means that you may or may not be subject to self-employment tax, that 15.3% that can typically tilt you over when it comes to your tax liability. Did you know that you can have an LLC and an S-Corp?
¿Por qué no los dos?
You can actually have both of them. You don't have to choose. And in most cases, I recommend that people do have both of them. I typically will recommend that my clients have a single member LLC and that they also have an S corporation. Let me tell you why I make that recommendation. When you are in a single member LLC, I can pay my kids on payroll who are ages 17 and below. I can actually put them on a payroll, give them an actual W-2, and they do not have to pay any payroll tax withholdings. Therefore, I can pay my kids, I can make them a part of that business, and I can minimize taxes by doing that. I cannot do that in an S corporation. Yes, I can put my kids on payroll in an S corporation, but I have to withhold the actual employment taxes from their actual payroll. So having a LLC and an S corp combined can really give you great tax savings. Additionally, if I'm in an LLC, a limited liability company, most LLCs, if I'm in an active business, I am going to pay self-employment tax. What does that mean? Simple scenario. Let's say you make $100,000 in an LLC and you make $100,000 in an S-Corp. Your LLC is going to pay federal income tax. Your LLC is going to pay state income tax if you're in a taxable state. Your S-Corp is going to pay federal income tax. Your S-Corp is going to pay state income tax. However, you're also going to pay self-employment taxes, which means that $100,000 is going to get hit with an additional tax of 15.3%. On $100,000, that's $15,300. So on top of federal income tax, on top of state income tax, you're also going to pay self-employment tax. However, if I have an LLC and I have an S-Corp, what if I were to pay my S-Corp a consulting fee to reduce the amount of money left on the table in my LLC? Now, I want to make sure you know, in order to have intercompany transactions, there has to be proper accounting, proper invoicing between the two. There has to be a proper business reason. The key takeaway from you is that when you have both, you can really work on tax minimization strategies. That is so important because you need to keep your cash in your pocket. One of my big benefits of converting an LLC to an S-Corp is all about me having confidentiality and anonymity on my personal income tax return. If I am operating my personal income tax return and I have a single member LLC, that single member LLC is showing up on my personal income tax return on Schedule C. That means that if I have to give my personal income tax return for an audit, for a loan, for any financial reason, they're going to be able to see my LLC and all the income and expenses associated with it. But when you have an S corporation, which is a separate taxable entity, all of that information goes on to the S corporation return. The only thing that will come on my personal income tax return is one line item that says S Corp and the amount of income or loss. I like to keep my things separated. I don't need people all in my business. Therefore, an S corporation gives you that extra separation, if you will. But in addition to that, an S corporation minimizes that self-employment tax we talked about. You're not automatically subject to that 15.3%. However, you do have to take wages from an S corporation. You actually have to put yourself on payroll as an officer, and you actually have to take a W-2 out of the company. What does that really mean? That means that you have to go with a payroll service. That means that you're going to get a paycheck, whether it's monthly, weekly, bi-weekly. That means you're going to withhold income tax. That means you're going to pay into self-employment tax. But the beautiful thing about that is you are growing your business up because you're in business for two reasons. You're in business to make a profit, and you're in business to get paid for your services, to do both. So when you make that transition from an LLC to an S Corp, what you're saying is, you know what? I'm starting to grow up. I'm going to pull a paycheck and I'm going to pull a profit. So I love that transition from an LLC to an S Corp because it is definitely a feel-good moment. Now, I want you to explore the factors that you need to really consider when you're thinking about making that transition, because you cannot just make it about dollars and cents. You really got to make a strategic decision when you're thinking about transitioning from an LLC to an S Corp or even an S Corp to an LLC. One of the factors that you have to consider is, what is your long-term goal for your business? What do you plan to do? If you are operating as a single member LLC, that actual operation is being filed in with your individual return. If you are an S Corp, you can issue stock, you can bring on other shareholders into your corporation. In exchange for stock, they can give you cash. It's really easier inside of an S corporation to actually bring in additional individuals. What do you want the long-term journey of your business to be? If you want your business to be around for a long time, you want to consider going to an S corporation. But you also got to consider the accounting aspect, the paperwork, the regulations that go along with it, the governance. You got to file minutes every single year. You got to make sure that you're keeping your statement of information update every single year. You got to file that corporate tax return every single year. So there's other administrative costs to switching from an S-Corp to an LLC and from an LLC to an S-Corp. My recommendation is that when you get about $50,000 in net profit from your LLC, that's when you really got to make that consideration to switch. Why? Because at $50,000 net profit, you're already paying self-employment tax. If you switch over to an S corporation, you could throw yourself on payroll for about $20,000, take a distribution down of about $30,000, but you gotta be disciplined when you're doing it. So here's the major takeaways, my friends. You can have an LLC and an S corp together. You can transition from an LLC to an S corp. You just got to know when to make the transition. You need to understand the fundamental differences between being an LLC and being an S corp, and you got to understand the governance around it. You got to take a step back and go, what do I really want to be when I grow up? Then grow up and make it happen. You know why? Because each one of you started your business because you wanted to make money. But you also got to think long term. You're in business because you want to get paid, you want to have a profit, and you want to build wealth over time. So when you know better, you got to do better. That is why I want you to like, comment, and subscribe so I can keep you updated on all things business and tax.